folks, and welcome back to the channel. We've got another podcast episode here for you. This is episode 57. We're really getting somewhere with these now. We've got Straff Cole on. We're going to be going over a few different things here. So it really did kind of need this podcast episode to give you a perspective from our point of view, which isn't clouded. It's not caught down in multiple different tweets, and it's just more of a direct approach and getting to hear a more human side of things. Straff, there's so many different things sort of going on in the community at the moment, but I think one of the biggest precursors to everything and the real sort of issues that are underlying is actual development, right? This idea of instead of just tweaking tax here and borrowing from here to pay back to there sort of thing, actually looking at real kind of development. But with this development side of thing, there comes substantial risk. We've all seen these real sort of big hacks inside our chain and outside our chain. It happens. These people are more or less like experts, in my opinion, at doing what they do a lot of the time. So you have to be so careful when you are approaching the development side of things. It's such a conundrum, isn't it?
Yeah, good evening, Jay. It's always a bit difficult with security, with code security overall. There's of course never a 100% guarantee, but yeah, we have seen many occasions in LUNC where hired developers actually have done something unnoticed that finally led to a rug of the project, and of course with effect to investors and the project itself. So it's always an issue, and it always can happen.
Yeah, definitely. So something I've noticed over the past 24 to 48 hours is a lot of people are very split on this tax issue of raising the tax from 0.5% to 1.5%. And it highlights the need, doesn't it, for this tax to gas system and starting to walk down a path where we find something that's more suited to everybody's needs, even if that's walking towards the direction of eventually getting this slider system. It's a step in the right direction, isn't it? But once again, who's going to develop something like this? And it's always that thing, right, where we've paid, haven't we? 3 months in advance, we kind of say what we would like, and we've never really got it. And the only way things have really got done recently, like the dynamic commission module and all of the other things that we've been doing, it's just because we've knuckled down behind the scenes. We've got out of all of the riffraff, the chaos, and we've just got on with it at this point. And I think that's what we need to see more of. And I think what the community wants to see is more of these kind of developers. And I think, a lot of people point fingers, right? But it always brews down to this same thing. We never see people that are willing to work. It's always sort of like, oh, well, you expect us to be slaves and this kind of thing. But it doesn't work like that, does it? Not everybody has the same mindsets as people like us that will just simply be here because we enjoy the technology, we put the time in, and we've been here from the beginning, right? There's so many developers out there, isn't there, Strafe, at the moment that want to work, but they need effective and secure means to work. So it's like, where do you cross the line with these things? Where do you say to yourself, well, it's safe to do it from this person, but not from this person? And where can you, it's like a cheetah hidden among millions of cheetahs, and you've got to pick the cheetah that's going to sort of get you. And you're never going to be able to pick. You're never going to be able to know who's really who, because it just brews down to Git identities and stuff like that. There's responsibilities when it comes down to anything like this. Any kind of development, there's responsibility. But when you introduce, say, for example, the pay-per-job system, the responsibility becomes huge, especially on those that are behind the repositories, who maintain the repositories for our code base. Because, for example, if we have an inside man do something like what happened to Terraport or Candice, right? Where does that leave the chain, Strafe?
Well, I think the whole contribution topic is a very, very difficult one, and I had endless conversations and discussions during the past days about the approach that is mentioned in the current draft of the paper job, which is including the KYC. And, well, there are several things that we have to keep in mind. We have to keep in mind that currently, while the chain wants to be decentralized, we have a core maintenance team that has been elected for the quarters 1 to 3 and has agreed to continue maintenance voluntarily for Q4. And I can name Vin in this context. I think there's no issue with it. He is completely doxed. So let's say he merges something into the core that is malicious, then he is currently, besides Frag, the only one contributing that can be, in theory, held accountable.
And they will be held accountable, and that's what I think makes the biggest difference. We all know that they would be held accountable if that happened. It wouldn't be the people who suggested the code change. It would be the person who merged the code change.
Yeah, that's the thing. So, in fact, the KYC mentioned in the proposal is not something that eliminates every risk of malicious actors or malicious code. It's a mitigation of the risk that the ones elected to be in charge of core review and core merging have to take. So you can think of it like it's at the discretion of the core reviewers that are elected if they are willing to merge code that comes from people they have no background from. That means I can tell it from my own perspective. I have also developed code and put it up for review, but I myself am not yet KYC'd. I'm not doxed, and so I'm fully aware that if the L1 TF would now merge my code, and I would have managed to put something in it that does harm to the investors or to the chain, they would be the only ones people could turn to. And so, in my opinion, it's up to them to decide if they are willing to take that risk. And that is what I told others all the time during the past days, that finally it's up to governance. If governance at some point decides we don't want that, we don't want people that can decide if they take a risk, then governance needs to decide to be fully permissionless and put it all on the validators to take the risk of installing the code. And I'm not sure if every validator would be willing to do so.
If you think about it, right, if you look at the current validating base, the majority of them are Luna-based validators. If they're not Luna-based, they're based somewhere else in the cosmos. They're not really building a lot here. These kind of validators do little to no research. Strafe, you and I know this best firsthand, that the amount that these people know is very little because they don't have the time, they're not putting in the energy, and they're not getting involved, and they just kind of keep low profile. And it's normally a thing where they'll go with the majority of the flow. There's such a huge danger in putting these kind of things just down to the validators. Because for me, at the moment, this 1.5% tax, it's silly, and it's only going to dwindle the volume. But it's like, at what point do we begin to learn these lessons? Do we learn from sort of like bickering with each other, or do we learn from seeing actual evidence which shows us that this is actually a bad idea?
I mean, you know, I am not a fan of the tax at all, and though I agree that we need a small tax currently for funding purposes and for the overall, yes, still quite big burn narrative that keeps part of the community running. But raising it to 1.5, that means, I mean, people talk about contracts that can be whitelisted, but for some use cases that is quite yeah, unrealistic that it will be whitelisted, and you have to add further contracts to the whitelist whenever you launch one. But contract interactions currently are subject to double tax, one for the sender, one for the recipient of the funds. So for 0.5, it's 1% that you are taxed, and for 1.5, it's then 3% that you are taxed. For example, for a swap on TerraSwap, as long as that pair is not whitelisted. And also, I have to say that the whitelisting is still pending review. We have a very, very rudimentary whitelisting that is not suited for the broader scope, because it would put all DApps that currently apply for whitelist in a big, big pool. So they are whitelisted among each other. And yeah, and the new whitelisting should introduce zones, but I'm deviating from the original question. So I'm a bit not angry, but I'm a bit confused that this tax proposal gets such, currently at the current point, such close to 50%, because it's yeah, from my point of view, it's quite ridiculous to do it. But finally, even that is up to governance, and I also said I will not lobby others to change their votes. I will give my opinion. I will say I think it's a bad idea, but I will not contact individuals saying to change their votes, because I don't want to be approached in that way either. And yeah, regarding back to the topic we have with the code base, yeah, everything on this chain finally is up to governance. So if people are saying there's currently gatekeeping happening, they can change it. It's governance. So I don't really align with the opinion that the current form of development is gatekeeping in a specific sense of blocking contributions, for a simple reason, that I think open source is not the same as permissionless development. I often get the reasoning that the argument that LUNC is open source, and it's open source, it's open for all to contribute. That's true, but most open source projects I know, we can take TerraSwap, we can take Luna v2. They all have a core maintenance team that makes sure that what is contributed is okay to have in the core. And I think that's something that is necessary. And that is why I say there are only two routes with that: full permissionless or KYC or other verification options on discretion of the elected core maintainers, because there's not really something in between.
So if we look at this whole gatekeeping kind of motive, it's ridiculous to say the least, because there's a few points I want to emphasize here. Is this pay-per-job module is being built in order to be handed to governance. This means all of the positions will be filled by governance. They'll be elected by governance, right? And then once again, we need to stress this so heavily. This does not prevent anybody from going on Station and going on Commonwealth and creating their own spend proposal, just like Genuine Labs did. Now, if we look at the Genuine Labs situation, this is a really good example. What they proposed has all mostly already been done, and this brews down to poor communication and just poor LCD endpoints for the community, validators, moderators, anybody who's anybody to see on a screen, this is what's going on, this is what's passed, this is what's being done. That's so much easier to do when you have better systems in place. So this whole gatekeeping thing's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. We need better systems. It's really that simple. And like you've been saying, right? Every single repository has a handling team, and that team is responsible for ensuring that no malicious code gets put into the code base. Because if someone does put something malicious in, for example, there's a proposal up again to get rid of this 800 million USTC, and as much as somebody sits there and says to me, oh, we're doing it this way, you know, this removes any of the kind of burdens, it's just getting to a point now where you're going to introduce something into the code base which is totally against everything, and then it just, what happens one day when suddenly a wallet's not been active for 2 years and it's got, you know, a couple billion whatever LUNC in it, and these people suddenly are putting in code changes to get rid of your LUNC or your USTC, or, you know, it's a very scary situation when you allow for self-regulation of a code base, because you can change anything at that point. You can write any changes you want. You could send money to any wallets that you wanted, as long as you could figure out how to do it and how to write the code changes, and you can get them in. You know, it's really a real dire situation at that point, isn't it? So you need to have KYC people on the end of this to ensure that, for example, the community, which is you, the investors, the people that loads of us are trying to always keep safe, have options. So you're not left with, for example, a $40,000 payout, and then you're all going, where's our repeg? And then the team's kind of saying to you, well, you didn't pay us for a repeg. And they're right, you didn't. We paid them to look into different ways to repeg, and that's the biggest difference. And you can't really moan at them for that, because they have gone to CXs, they have kind of done these things, and this is what it all brews down to, isn't it, Strafe? It's just all poorly managed and set out, and all of this can change, right? You can get people like Genuine Labs working. Strafe, you, and I'm going to put this out there right now in this podcast for everybody who's listening, there's a pool of like 6 developers, isn't there, Strafe? Cosmos developers, raring and ready to work. These are all people that are completely outside of the LUNC realm. They're just Cosmos developers ready to work. But they can't work because everything works off of this 3-month payment system that it's always failed, hasn't it, Strafe? It's never got us anywhere. We never get our money's worth, do we?
Oh, the issue is that I'm not sure if we didn't get the money's worth, because we have no clear definition of jobs that were paid for. We have a rough scope, and we paid for the time, in fact, and not for a specific job somehow. So that's why paper job and a clear job definition is very essential. And getting back to what you said, really, and as you stressed it, it is really important to say that the paper job is governance ruled. If it is put up for vote, and even if it then passes, the positions are not set. The positions are nominated and have to be voted in by governance then.
I mean, if these people wanted to nominate the Pope and the Pope had responded, we could have the Pope on there. He could be on the board. It's that simple. It's not us who decide these things, right?
No.
This is the biggest difference, isn't it, Strafe? We don't build things for our own advantage. We build it and we just give it to the community. At no point have people like us ever said, oh, you've got to pay us all for using the AC module, or you've got to pay us for this, or, you know, it doesn't work like that in our world. I think we've proven that many, many times over. And I think people are a little bit scared. They're scared that this possibly could be gatekeeping. but we've got to stress it so much. This is all governance. It's all governance. Everything brews down to governance.
Yeah, it is governance. I mean, you could call it gatekeeping. If you say, okay, the elected core reviewers and the committee are elected by governance and they decide because they are doxed or KYC'd themselves that KYC is mandatory. We need to have it in the original proposal so they are not told afterwards that they want KYC contributions and the community makes an outcry that that was never mentioned and we wouldn't have elected you. But on the opposite, if the community says we elect someone in, we want permissionless development. We don't want the safeguards that you are telling us we should use, then they could introduce someone that says, I don't give a fuck about KYC. Everyone is free to merge code into this. And the community could even elect someone in that is not KYC or doxed himself. So finally, it's up to governance. But we have to put the KYC in it. Otherwise, it couldn't be used later. If someone that is elected doesn't insist on it, then it's up to him to take the risk. Or if the community elected someone that is not accountable, then it's up to governance to take the risk or on the validator set. And if that happens, it is up to each validator to decide if he installs the code, if he leaves the active set or not. That's it.
That's what it really boils down to. This, for me, ensuring that it's all a two-way door, right? Not a one-way door where it's a committee, they're installed, they are chosen for those positions. We've seen this before, right? It's not like we haven't seen this before. And this is where the fear-mongering comes into it because of previous committees, all right? This isn't something, I don't even want to be on it. I never want to be on something like this ever. It's too much responsibility. It's
I was on it. It is totally, not what I want to. But yeah, it's something with this paper job. It is needed to have someone checking if the team that is applying is suitable to take the job. Someone needs to check it because, as we said earlier, in the current state of LUNC, in my personal opinion, governance is not suited to decide on technical things in terms of software development for level 1. And that is the reason why I think it is mandatory to have a group of people. And to emphasize this again, I will not take one of those positions. I will just advise voluntarily anyone who asks for advice, as I did prior. But it is mandatory to have people that can judge on such things like GitHub history, on prior contributions, or checking the KYC status by verification of certificates and something like that. And if, again, I don't want to repeat myself, but I have to in this case, it's all up to governance to weaken this, to make this less restrictive. It's up to governance depending on the people they put in the positions.
It's responsible, isn't it? It would be so irresponsible for us to just build this paper job system and just go, yeah, here you go. We're not responsible for anything. Don't explain anything. And just at the end of it, go, well, this is what happens when you let people introduce random foreign code. But this is really a situation for me. Like I said, it's a two-way door and everything's interchangeable. This thing's getting released like you're going to play bowling, right? You've got your kids with you and your kid pitches a ball and it hits the gutter. What do? You put up safety barriers, don't you? Right? So what we're doing is giving you a system with safety barriers. If you decide as a community through governance you would like to remove those barriers, that's up to you. If you want to get the Pope on the team, it's totally up to you. If you want to get Scooby-Doo on that committee, you can do it. It's really as simple as that. This sort of system would foster in, for me, if done correctly, and everybody's contributing and everybody's of one mind, right? And everybody's contributing, getting jobs put up, and you've got all these different developers taking these jobs. It's only going to push development forward. You want tax to gas. Everybody suddenly is interested now in tax to gas, getting a gas slider system, this kind of idea of a Goldilocks tax. But we could have that, couldn't we, Strafe? The developers are there. But these kind of developers, they want money. Right? They're not going to come and work for free. Trust me, they've been asking me for weeks, oh, when could we come and work? And I say, well, unless you're going to work for free or you're going to put up a 3-month proposal, it's sort of hit and miss at the moment. There's so many developers. When I saw Genuine Labs pop up, it was really nice to see that. I mean, it must have felt nice for you as well, Strafe, because there's nobody on this blockchain that is preventing anybody from committing code. In fact, it's the complete opposite. If you want to commit code to the code base, you can do it. That's what we had to do. We develop things and then we have to put it forward to the repo maintenance team and they look at it. They check it, they test it, and they go through it thoroughly. And that is the mature thing to do. It's the smart thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I also need to address one thing that I mentioned earlier, the open source definition. And I have to do this because I got approached multiple times that LUNC is open source, and someone even sent me kind of a GPT definition of an open source blockchain. I will read it out and then I will tell you my opinion why this exactly strengthens my point and not the contrary. So an open source blockchain refers to a blockchain system or platform where the underlying software code is publicly available and can be freely used, modified, and shared by anyone. Open source means that the source code of the blockchain software is made available to the public. Anyone can view, modify, and distribute this code under the terms of the open source license. And this openness promotes transparency, collaboration, and innovation, since developers worldwide can contribute to the codebase, review it, or create derivatives. And that does not mean, in my opinion, that it is deployed on chain every contribution. It has to be checked nonetheless. Still, currently on LUNC, with the core maintenance team that we have right now, everyone can review code and give his opinion. Everyone can contribute to the code base. Everyone can download the code. Everyone can use it on his own machine. All that is the definition of open source. But having a core team that reviews and does the final approval, the final merge, is still not opposing this open source approach. In fact, it's like this for many, I would even say the most open source project that you have, a core instance that takes the last look on it and decides if it harms the core or not. And you can have 100 reviewers from external sources that just gives the core reviewers more confidence in the code, makes their life easier. But especially in a situation where they are publicly known, their details are known, it is still their risk to take whether to merge and release something or not.
For me, if we look at what's going on around us, labor market itself is part of the enterprise hub. Labor market is what I see as a slightly more advanced version of the pay per job. And all of these are more or less it's like Warp has a very simple kind of way to deal with this, but it misses kind of a lot of the important stuff. Labor market in itself is going to be game changing for Luna, and the reason why it's going to be game changing is because they obviously own Luna, right? They're the maintainers of the code base. Now, nobody owns the LUNC chain, and this is the biggest issue, isn't it, Strafe? And everybody will always argue, and there'll always be an argument there, no matter how many podcasts you're doing, how many times you explain it to people, there'll always be the argument there.
Yes,
Because nobody
it's
owns this
always, yeah,
chain,
yeah.
we all agreed as a community through governance that the L1 currently will maintain the code base. And we have to respect that. If we voted that in, it's worked for us so far, why would you suddenly change things? It doesn't make any sense. If anybody wanted it to change, you would just suggest that the next repository is all coming from a different place. It's not complicated to do, but the difference is this has all been voted in by governance. So we're very fortunate to have a group of people to actually get this kind of system up and running because it's intricate. If anybody thinks this is like a simple badminton match, it's not. This is like uber complex stuff. The way it's got to be handled and the risks that are imposed with this kind of thing are great. And honestly, like Strafe's saying, KYC removes a lot of that. But once again, it's down to governance. It's down to the people that get put on the paper job, the ones that are voted in. If a KYC developer decides to himself, I trust this guy, I'll merge his code, and he's not KYC'd, guess what? That's up to that guy, and we can hold him accountable. And it's at that point, right, you've got a sense of safety. This isn't about centralizing or gatekeeping or identifying people. It's about building barriers. It's about building an environment where we're all safe, where we can have all of these developers that we just don't know. Because even though I've interviewed 6, 7, 8, 9 Cosmos developers that are on standby behind the scenes in a development group, right? I still couldn't say to everybody, yeah, I trust them 100%. Let's merge any code that they do. No, you've got to prove your worth, right? This paper job system could be a way for many people who don't have credibility on this chain to actually build up credibility, right, Strafe? Get voted in, do the right thing, merge things, do things right, get paid. It's only going to work for your benefit. And that's the biggest difference, is everybody wants to see different things. Everybody wants to see all of this development, and they don't want to see tax changes. They don't want to see a new website, and they're tired of seeing the same 3 proposals go up. Then something's got to give.
Yeah. You know, it's right. I just have to correct one thing because otherwise people will jump on it and say, oh, telling wrong. Yep, we have no voted in repository. We have no canonical repository. Canonical. So in theory, you can propose a release from any repository you want to. But we still have, I don't know if anyone disagrees with that, we still have a core maintenance team that was voted in by governance, even though they are not having a spend proposal for Q4. And so as long as that doesn't change, as long as they don't put down their mandate, as long as no one puts up a proposal to have a new core maintenance team, as long as that is the fact, it's still the L1TF. And so we have to have something in such proposals that enables people to share risk, to mitigate risk. And again, if other people decide they don't need it, then they don't need it. Governance, governance, governance.
It's so important. It's like a fundamental that people forget, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're centralizing things, you're gatekeeping." It's like, well, how can that be? How can that possibly be if we're creating something, putting all of our time, energy, and resources into it, and then just going, right, here, now you guys all need to vote in who you want on this. Who do you trust? Who do you want on there? Do it all through governance. And like we've said, I will never, ever be part of a team, right, that's going to take payments, right? If anybody decides to go off and pursue things, all the better for them. You know, everybody's in crypto to make money, and developers develop normally because they're getting paid. And that's just the way the cookie crumbles. And the quicker we can come to terms in reality with these kind of systems and get them in place and become more unified to understand that this is probably the best approach for our system if we want development coming from so many different places. Because you've just got to mitigate that risk. If we've got 25 developers working, you're going to need a good core team to be able to go through and dissect everything, merge things, and do the right. I can't stress it enough, but it all comes down to governance every time. And this is, for me, what's the winning factor of everything we've ever built, is that it's never been something for us. It's never been for us to benefit. It's never been for put ourselves on it. It's all for governance.
Nothing more I can say to that.
Yeah. So even ourselves, right? Every ounce of work we've done, every piece of code you've written has had to go through a meticulous, rigorous process. We're not above anything here. We go through the same process everybody else would have to go through if they wanted to commit to this chain. They wanted to work on it. It's that simple. You find a problem, you develop a fix, you submit the required PRs if needed, you do the governance proposals, and you get it all, cross the T's, dot the I's. It's going to be interesting because this is going to brew down to validators thinking that this is all KYC based and it's like this purge or whatever, and it's not. It's not, and I think it's going to be down to the community to better understand what this system is, what it does, and what it's going to achieve. And I think we've simplified that as best as possible without overcomplicating things too much. Because, like I said, it's a complicated thing to develop, isn't it?
Which exactly it depends on what you want exactly to achieve.
Well, you've got the basic system, which we've kind of agreed, gone over through governance. And for everybody listening here, right, we have been arguing the pros and the cons of this, haven't we, Strafe, for days and weeks now? And
Yeah,
no
of
matter
course
what,
we have. It's not a quick shot. It's something that we have thought about, and that's not meant to put everyone from our circle, our broader circle, into positions. It's just something that is somehow necessary in our opinion.
Yeah, so there was two choices, but now, as we stand, there's three. We don't build this system at all, and we revert back to our caveman sort of instinct of throwing sticks at each other and posting quarterly spend proposals. Or we provide the system with the safety barriers. Those were the two choices we were kind of at an end with. It was one or the other, but now it's a situation where everybody needs to understand is you can remove the safety barriers. If you want to do that, that's totally up to you guys as a community, as a validating set. It's up to you. You want to remove the safety barriers and go wild, that's down to you. If the chain crumbles, then that's the reality, isn't it, Strafe, of these kind of actions. But we ourselves, it makes no sense to release this system without the safety barriers. They have to come in place with them.
Yes, it is much more complicated to make a totally stripped down version of something which is leaving room for everything, and just after it trying to tighten it on several places. So you need something that is as solid as possible. And if people decide to weaken it afterwards, they are free to do so.
Yeah, I think for me, it's one of the only sort of real routes forward at the moment that for me, it's going to be a worthwhile adventure that's going to yield. and it's going to yield decent results. I mean, you've spoken with these genuine labs people, right? And they all come from the notional area of things. And like I was saying, it's so good to see that there's a team putting themselves forward. But did you see the reaction once again when people were asking for money before work's being done? Did you catch the reaction? It was that same kind of sour reaction.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we have in the draft of the paper job proposal, there's also a prepayment and a post payment, a split payment, in fact. And I have also received feedback that those splits might need to be adjusted before it goes up for vote. And everything like that is something that can be discussed, that has to be discussed. And it's not like that we are saying, eat or die, take this or take nothing. It's put up for discussion, and it's room for adjustments if they are necessary. But still, I think it cannot be weakened to a point where it makes no sense to put it up any longer.
Because all of the responsibility then falls on, you guessed it, people who released such a dangerous system which allowed for such dangerous means of working. Yeah.
Who would be to blame if this proposal would be that weak that it has,
And if you're a bad actor, this is exactly what you want. You would like a weakened system put into place so you could start getting malicious code put into play. It's the thing that you would do, right? If someone is willing to bury themselves from the very beginning of Terra Rebels to the Terraport Rug incident, trust me, there's probably more of them hiding amongst us at this point. So
there are. I mean, we don't. You don't, and I don't say that among the current active community are bad actors in terms of malicious code producing developers, but at the same time, we have seen many kind of criminal intentions inside LUNC from different projects that were affected. And it's not that that you always see it coming. Sometimes you have a quite good suspicion that something doesn't look right, but sometimes it comes kind of out of the blue. And you're never safe, and it would be not good to say KYC is the solution to everything and it's a 100% safeguard and no one will dare to do nasty things when they are KYC'd. That's absolutely not the point. The point is not removing every risk. The point is just mitigating risk.
Exactly. Yeah, and folks, remember, our systems have always worked on payment up front, work comes later. We've all been through those long 3-month windows of getting to the end of that 3 months and then suddenly getting answers to certain things and finding out this hasn't been done or that hasn't been done. We're behind. We're not in parity. Instead, we would have a system, right, where people would get paid for the work that they've done, and the time they commit to it is down to them. And they get their bonus payment, they get their bounty payment, whatever you want to call it, but they get it after the job's done.
Yeah, and also something important is that this time span has to be mentioned beforehand and can be exceeded if it was announced due to unforeseen circumstances. But there has to be a time frame announced in which this job will be done. And if the team fails to do so, it might not be considered for a while for future jobs just because it's not reliable. And even that is a rule where you could say, oh, why do we need that? It doesn't matter if they take 1 month or 4 months for implementing something. But it again comes down to to something that we need a professional work environment for this paper job. That means the teams that want to get something done have to have the ability to judge on how many time it probably will take and also factor in some unforeseen circumstances so they are still on the safe side. And that's something I think is important to mention, because it's another point in the proposal that people could say is not really necessary to block someone from further from further applications for this paper job if he fails to deliver. But on the other hand, well, if the community decides to let someone apply again, even if this wasn't met, then it's up to governance. They could overrule this rule in the paper job proposal. And that's with every single rule. But everyone has to be aware that if governance goes against the personal risk, the personal risk willingness of an individual, that individual is also free to leave or to not fulfill what is demanded from it.
I agree. So hopefully, as we roll into Q1 of 2024, which is going to be an important year for the LUNC chain, it's going to be a year where we either sink or float, in my opinion. There's a lot of stuff going on. But something's got to give. We can't keep resorting back to this caveman initiative of real rudimentary means of getting work done on the chain, because it only benefits those people, right? And as much as there's good people, there's bad people, there's people who sit on the fence and in the middle, people who get money from the chain, I, like most people, want to see the most from that money, right? If you hire a person in real life for your company, you want to see the most for your money. You want them to turn up every day. You want them to do the work that's outlined and tasked for them to do. That's how the real world works. If that happened to you, would you keep bringing that person back? Would you keep hiring them? Of course you wouldn't. You would get rid of them. And maybe after a few weeks, they come back, you'd maybe given them another opportunity, but that starts to dry up, right? And people prove their worth. That's why I'm saying it's going to sink or it's going to float. It's going to be an interesting year. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how this tax policy pans out and how Binance reacts as a whole, especially with CZ not being the CEO anymore and not being really as active as he was. It's going to be interesting. What's your forecast on this, Strafe?
On Binance?
Yeah, just the tax policy as a little closure here. The end of
If you mean that, it's currently at nearly 50%, I think. It can go both ways. I hope it doesn't. Hope it sways to the no. But yeah, we cannot be sure about it.
Yeah, we've got a big issue with validators that are, and this is what I hate, is when everybody starts turning on each other during these times and lobbying each other, when really the biggest enemy on our chain right now is all of these validators that are rent seeking. And I know a lot of people don't like to get involved, they like to sit on the fence, but that's the reality of things. And if we can't address that reality and actually look and say to ourselves, what are these people doing for the chain? Why are they voting? What's driving this? Do they really have any idea about the chain? It's a situation where we've got to get more asserted. We've got to get more reacquainted and understand who's developing, who is moving this boat along, and who's drilling holes in it, who's bailing water out, who's manning the sails. It's so important we start to understand this. And this is all boiling down to people going and doing their own research and actually understanding the implications of what such changes can do. Because I know 90% of the community has not even realized that this could probably affect the Binance burns. And I know they're whitelisted. I know there's a very slim chance that this could affect it, but nonetheless, the chance is there, the risk is there. And it's just so silly for us during these times where we've seen a substantial pump. We saw a lot of coins move because of the DCM, and that really helped. I was explaining this in my my videos yesterday about just moving coins. People don't even need to spend their LUNC. That it just needs to move a lot of the time, and it's a strange situation. But if we can see more movement, if we can see more things happening, more activity, more commodities, more trading, more movement, this chain's going to do a lot better, a lot better. And with all of the tools that are being dropped in the Cosmos now, specifically with Enterprise Hub, we've got our IBC hooks back online. There's a lot we can look forward to, but we need means to develop stuff properly. All right? It's very important. Folks, this has been a good one. It's been a while since we've done a podcast episode. It's a bit of a strange one at the moment. There's not a lot of active people in the community who are actively developing actual things. It's just a lot of people talking and simple changes and stuff like that. So hopefully in the future we get some more interesting people coming on board. But we'll try to keep you up to date. And yeah, you know, show people this video. If people are confused, link them to this video. Let people know what you've heard here today. Folks, stay safe, stay humble, stay aware, and as always, we'll catch you in the next one.